This is the commemoration of Professor Alito, and he was my professor too. So I would like to say something uh, on the title of this event, that is Alito, the story lives on. Yes, definitely. I feel uh, so close to this that yes, the story lives on because of so many of you who have made time to be over here today to cherish and take forward what he left behind. I I feel so happy to see so many of you over here. Thank you for coming. It's so good to see all of you. Um, as a matter of fact, most people make investments in capital markets, in share markets, in land. But our beloved professor, he invested in minds, in people, and his own students. He had this, particular way of believing in somebody, which was so powerful and so, transforming. Um, Though he is not with us here, I'm sure that there are so many more Alitorians out there who we hope will carry this torch of hope, perspective, and a critical approach in education or in life in general. So, with these few words, I now invite Father Anthony de Silva. He needs no introduction. He is the director of the Xavier Center of Historical Research, and he has also provided us with this platform to hold the launch. And we are immensely grateful to you, Father. So I invite Father Anthony to say a few words.
Thank you very much for the introduction. And I too like to welcome this gathering this evening to the program, and also to XCHR, which is a familiar institution, I think, to most of you. I am delighted that the Xavier Center of Historical Research has been invited to partner Hanv Konn, the team, at this memorial event, saluting and celebrating the person and the achievements of Dr. Alito Siqueira. The poster accompanying the announcement of this event has a lovely photograph of Dr. Alito. The inquiring eyes and the gently skeptical smile portray well the heart and mind of Professor Alito. It is his listening heart and searching mind that attracted young students to Alito. Today, they are inspired to prepare this memorial program in his honor. Alito was always a friend of Xavier Center and directed his students to make use of the rich resources at our center. We hope his students, now in academic or professional jobs, will continue to maintain this intellectual linkage with Xavier Center and the community of scholars in Goa. You are always welcome to the center to further your study or research in the tradition of Dr. Alito. Let us keep the memory of Alito alive by doing what he did best, namely by listening and learning about our inner self and sharing the experience with others in society. Thus, the story lives on. Thank you very much and have a nice evening.
Thank you, Father, for those kind words. We now have a small clip of Professor Alito to show you. So please sit back and let us reminisce these moments.
Myths and stories organize society. Myths tell you whom you can marry, whom you can't. Myths tell you when one should plant or sow and when one should reap. Myths, in that sense, help organize society and make what it is. There are stories that tell you of how our society originated, and a whole cosmology of that society is given by its myths or stories. In this sense, myths and stories are foundational. While they answer universal question, each community has its own way of presenting this. Actually, in the sense, your question is not very fair. What are you looking for when you say what's different? It's like saying Laila Majnu is different from, of course it's different from Shakespeare. Isn't it? So what are you asking? You're saying what's peculiar to Laila Majnu? It's set in India. So wrong question, BBC. Wrong question, Euronews.
What makes these stories?
These as opposed to which ones?
The ones that we are talking about. What's fascinating about them?
These are basically alternative knowledge systems. There are different ways in which we come to know the world. Okay? With the community undergoing transition. And like in many other communities, there is certain stigma attached to these communities, tribal communities. And so the younger people tend to neglect this knowledge system. What does the project try to do? The project tries to do two things at least. One is to conserve. And the other is to reinvent the stories to give them a contemporary use. At least this is the way I understand the project. This is not the first time these songs are being collected. They have been collected by people from other communities with the purpose of recording them for texts. More recently, over the last 3 or 4 years, there are people from within the community who have also started recording and transcribing them. And their attitude is very much to positively value this, to reverse value the humiliation that this community has experienced by bringing out these in the form of books and things. It's still a small section, but nevertheless it's there. One distinction of this project, it tries to find a meaning for these stories within the community itself, in the sense that you see the capacity, our capacity to change depends on our capacity to tell a different story. I must be able to imagine a different future. I must have a different story. So that the current generation of young people can begin to reimagine themselves differently without having to deny their past, then that would be a way in which they continue to transform the myths for a contemporary purpose. And this is something that we would all like to see through this project. Now, thanks to writing, which has its own enormous advantages in which stories can be read across time and across place. But this universalizing of the story loses also an important feature of the oral. The oral is extremely dynamic. No story can be told twice in the same way. Even the same person telling the story makes some change, some nuance, some feeling, some gesture that is different from the one that was earlier. Now you take all these little bits of differences and you multiply them over thousands of people telling the story over 5 generations. You have an enormous variety. Things get dropped, new things emerge. So one of Vitai's things is also to demonstrate how even across 2 villages, the story has lost something and gained something. So this dynamic character of the oral tradition is something we need to look at, and how we can, I don't know how to, the word is probably not revive, but how to bring it into our contemporary culture. Now we hope that there are other things that will come from this project. Basically, an interest and in revival of looking at this particular section of Goan society which has been discriminated as tribal in the past, and to bring on board their knowledge system, their cosmology, their stories of origin. One of the interesting things about the project, it's a sort of, what you say, it works at the intersection of 3 or 4 domains. One is conservation of intangible heritage. The other is social justice, trying to redress the asymmetries in the knowledge system by which tribal knowledges have been diminished. Third, pedagogy, the role that learning has to play in trying to absorb different knowledges of communities that have been excluded. And fourth, cultural politics. That is, that the stories of culture have to be articulated, voiced, and heard if the community is to get a voice and a mandate to live its own distinct life. I give an example in music. You probably have heard of how we have retro and fusion, where you take old songs and jazz them up to a modern idiom. I'm almost confident a decade or 2 or 3 from now, there will be people from this community using their myths and rewriting the ends, using characters from these myths, creatively mixing them with contemporary characters. So at once evoking the past, but also projecting towards the future. I don't know, think about it. Think about it. Do you need to tell this philosophy in the end, or is it obvious from the story? You think about it.
Thank you, Gasper, for showing us this video. It surely brought back a lot of memories for all of us, I'm sure. This video actually was, it's a collection of clips from an interview that Sir Alito had done for a future for Euronews. He was doing it it was a project on myths and stories in cultures, and this feature at that time was aired across Europe on the Euronews network in 2014. So with this, I want to move forward, and without wasting more time, I want to call our keynote speaker of the event, Professor Alexander Henn. Thank you so much, sir, for being with us here. Professor Alexander is a professor of religious studies of Arizona University, Phoenix, USA. He received his doctorate in 1988 from Mainz University, Germany. Currently, he works on the history and ethnography of Indo-European encounter and theory of ritual and religion. He was also assistant and adjunct professor of anthropology and universities of Heidelberg and Mainz. He has also served as visiting professor of Delhi University and Goa University. Among his publications about Goa are Hindu Catholic Encounter in Goa, Religion, Colonialism and Modernity, that was in 2015, and 2 other articles published in the journal Samaj, which was relating to Goa, Shrines of Goa, Iconographic Formation and Popular Appeal, published in 2018, and Krista Purana, Translating the Name of Goa in Early Modern Goa, published in 2015. Thank you. Now I call upon Professor Alexander to deliver the keynote address.
Dear audience, dear students, colleagues, and friends, it gives me great pleasure to speak before you today. And let me add also that I'm talking to you currently from Heidelberg, Germany. It gives me great pleasure to celebrate with you the splendid collaboration of students, editors, and designers working together to make possible the launch and release of this book, Hanv Konn, Who Am I? It also gives me great pleasure to recall and remember the legacy of the brilliant mind and man behind this project. That is the late Alito Siqueira, whom we all miss so much. I think Hanv Konn is not only an important book because it speaks about problems that students coming from tribal populations and students from rural areas have with Goa's higher education. Hanv Konn is also an innovative book because it addresses these problems in an unconventional and novel way. Quite obviously, this book emerges from a pedagogical concern that does not let itself be satisfied by political decision and legal policies alone. Hanv Konn makes clear that reservation policies regulating the access to higher education for ST and OBC populations do not suffice to resolve Goa's educational problem. Instead, what it shows is that what is needed are radical pedagogical reforms, reforms that practically and methodologically safeguard that students can benefit from their education. To put this in Alito Siqueira's own words, to give somebody the right to speak is not yet the same as to give somebody a voice. In other words, Hanv Konn is a book that makes it so clear that it is so much more complex, that it takes so much more effort, intellect, engagement, and courage to give students a voice, to give students their voice. In this sense, Hanv Konn, chapter by chapter, speaks about, reveals, criticizes, and overcomes conditions that impact, obstruct, and impede that students, and especially students from subaltern communities, can find their voices. Literally, all chapters of the book deal with circumstances illustrating what it means to belong to Goa's indigenous population, or to come from one of Goa's marginalized castes. Gaude, Velip, Kunbi, Karvi, and other tribal and marginalized caste communities from Goa and from outside Goa are, and that is the important thing, the subject and the agents of this book. That is what makes it novel and innovative. The chapters of the book also critically reflect what it means to be a woman and what it means to come from Goa's rural areas. So, to speak about the student contributors, Cheryl de Souza records the ambiguous role of Gaude women performing traditional dances in modern tourist contexts. 9 out of 10 chapters of the book are written by women, and the only one male contributor, Sachin Savio Moraes, critically analyzes the social impact that temporary male labor migration has for the female members of their families. Old, modern, and changing situations in Goa's Gao, the villages and rural areas, is another important topic of the book. Venetia Fernandez lets the reader take part in the bittersweet ethnography of the local memories of Kurdi, the village in Sangwem Taluka that in 1986 was immersed into the artificial lake created by the Selaulim Dam. Mosinha Fernandez critically asks what modernization and caste discrimination does to the remembering and forgetting of the Mand, that is, the songs and rituals of Catholic Gaude, Kunbi, and Karvi villages in the old conquest. Priti Patgonkar reveals the ambiguous nature of old social norms by sharing with us what it means to be a villager, yet not a Gaonkar of a traditional Goan village. Religious traditions, we learn, may also be a mixed blessing to the emerging identities of female students from subaltern communities. Rajeshwari Mehta vividly describes how Sabha, a new age Christian religious movement, has influenced her life and self-understanding as a young woman from a migrant fishing community living in Vasco da Gama. Khushbu Narangi finally presents an interesting interview-based study how religious traditions, coupled with traditional gender role expectations, influences decisions and chances of higher education for young women in Goa's Muslim community. Two theoretical issues stand out critically in the book. One is what technical academic jargon calls intersectionality. Marginalization, we learn, is produced in many layers. It has many layers. Social disadvantages are mounting one over the other. Chances of finding one's voice in higher education as a member of a tribal community are aggravated by obsolete gender norms that discriminate against women. Being identified with a marginalized caste makes things worse, as does coming from a village or rural area or coming from outside of Goa as a migrant. Religious customs and obsolete traditional norms add to the mix that produces social marginalization. Intriguingly, however, the book also evidences that academic procedures and educational institutions do not mediate, but further complicate the life and learning of subaltern students. Academic types of learning and institutional norms of speaking hinder rather than help the students. It is here that Alito Siqueira's emphatic and creative mind and method as a teacher came to its best. Alito did not harrow his students with the learning and repeating of what he called declarative knowledge. Alito encouraged, enabled, and empowered his students to create knowledge about themselves, their social circumstances, biographies, histories, and lives. Learning in higher education, Alito Siqueira emphasizes, must be a process of self-discovery and self-recovery. Along these lines, Alito also recognized that the medium of teaching and learning is the most critical of all. Without dismissing education and expression in international and national languages, English, Hindi, Urdu, Portuguese, Alito's pedagogy recognized the indispensable value and empowering intelligence lying in one's mother tongue and in local vernaculars such as Konkani. Not only did Alito therefore encourage his student Favita Gonçalves to study the embarrassing shame and detrimental denial that young people and students feel when speaking Konkani in their daily life and professional practice, which made it into another chapter of the book. Together with the help of experts, filmmakers, translators, artists, and editors, Alito also developed a pedagogy and form of learning that was multilingual and multimodal. He allowed his students to mix English, Konkani, and other languages and vernaculars in their writings. Students were also permitted to leave the grammarly and literary standards of normative language use and were encouraged to experiment with hybrid, poetic, non-standard writing styles. Successful and famous, even beyond the university classroom, and you all know that, became Alito's workshops for digital storytelling. Here, students learned to draft and craft personal stories and reflections with basic digital technologies, video filming, sound recording, photograph sampling. Alito wanted his students to combine sophisticated academic reflection with innovative and creative technology, and above all, with authentic personal concerns and questions. Hanv Konn, who am I? Asks Priyanka Velip, one of his pioneer students in her magisterial work. Priyanka asks this question in an academic setting, which, as she cogently illustrates in her chapter, was and is itself actively involved in the silencing, or as she calls it, in the othering of the Velip social community she belongs to. Intriguingly, Priyanka's question does primarily not produce an answer, but reveals the existence of an ignorance, the existence of a silence in the academic institution about her social group. It belongs to Alito's distinct authenticity that he encouraged his students to raise questions for which the academic institution he himself belonged to did not have quick answers. Hanv Konn is therefore not only an important and an innovative book, Hanv Konn is also a courageous book. It breathes the spirit and atmosphere of a classroom made by a wise and fearless teacher and a group of spirited and creative students. So I want to conclude with my congratulations and best wishes for this fabulous publication to all of its facilitators. First of all, of course, the students who wrote the chapters and made this possible, and then also Favita Diaz at Goa University Department of Sociology, and then of course to the entire group of Goan professionals whose name I cannot spell out individually here, who all helped together to make this possible. The filmmakers, publishers, copy editors, translators, lawyers, artists, and designers, who all collaborated to make this possible in the memory of Alito Siqueira. I hope and I wish that the project of Hanv Konn may still live on, as the little clip said right now, and will not end here, but will only be the beginning in Goa's higher education and in the public to pursue the program of teaching and learning that Alito described as leading to self-discovery and self-recovery. I can see that such a program can well thrive in the world of the global South and beyond, resonating with the call for social justice, critical caste, race, and gender studies, and the impact of indigenous and subaltern knowledge into the problems of the world. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much, Professor. for sharing your thoughts about Professor Alito and the book. Now I call upon Favita Dias to give us the description of the book. Favita Dias is an assistant professor in the Department of Sociology, Goa University.
I think Professor Henn has in detail already, spoken about the book, and I will be just adding to, like, from my view, how I see this book as and the relevance of it, especially in the Goan society. So I came across this Hanv Konn as like small kind of a pamphlet which had abstracts of all the papers that are there in the book. And I think, Liz, you were also with me at that time. It was in 2011 when there was this international seminar that was organized at the Goa University, and we were students at that time. So I remember this idea sir was putting across to the international audience at that time, and it took such a long time for this book to finally get published. And I feel very honored and privileged to be closely associated with this book. So as Professor Henn has already spoken about what these 10 stories are about, I see these 10 stories as being very unique in their own ways, and also touches upon different aspects of the Goan society itself. So I think this is something that Professor Alito, Alito always tried to do in our classroom, So before going to the whole society, it would be about your own self, your own life. So he would make you look into that part of your life which you would always avoid looking at, because it brings about a lot of uncomfortability, pain, and you don't want to remember those stories or that particular idea. And I think towards the end of the clip, that was the digital storytelling thing, wherein we were given just 5 minutes to think about something that changed your life. That's how you would start. And I think these dissertations, including my own, which is not in this book, was started like this. You write about something that has changed your life or something that you cannot remember, and that's how these things started. So all these stories not only touch upon the different aspect of the Goan society, but also touch upon different aspects of our own lives. And when I read just the abstracts, I could connect to, so I just read the abstracts at that time, and I could connect to different things that these different women were saying, about their own lives, about the pain, the discrimination that they face. And somewhere it also made me accept the different pains and the discriminations that I faced, and talk about these things, especially about my tribal identity, which I've been always hiding, and so it was for me like, if they can speak about it, then why can't I? It was just after reading the abstracts. So the power that these stories have is something that needs to be brought out. So, and I'm very sure that when people read these stories, they will be able to connect to, or they will have at least some similar experiences. So I see this book not only as, collection of stories that were, once dissertations and, something. I see this book as breaking, or, something that is completely unconventional, and setting up new standards within academics. We have some standardized, thought about what academic is. So that is something I see this book as, trying to challenge at, for mainly because, first of all, how these stories have come about, how they have been written, who have written them, what they speak about. And in the classroom, even now, you're not expected to, or you're at least, you don't talk about your personal lives, because these things are something that are not to be discussed within the classroom. They're taken for granted. And, I think that is something Sir Alito also tried to do, that taking the granted and showing that it is not something that is to be taken for granted. You can do tons of things with these with that one small thing that is taken as granted for. So I see this book as a space that is being provided, wherein you can put out your emotions, your feelings, and your pain and hurt. And when you read them, you feel that you're not alone. That is something these stories do. They touch you. They have this power. They may not, like, they may not be able to heal all the pain that you're going through, but it will make you feel that, okay, you're not the only one who's going through. And I think it has created a kind of a space. Now we are discussing all these stories. These stories have been given value, like how sir would say, reverse value the discrimination, and find value within these stories for our own selves. And then when we start discussing these things, it gets academic value as well. And stories are considered to be, or anything, I feel, at least in the education sector, it gets value once it is brought within the classroom. There is some discussion around it. So I think this book has that capacity, that has brought these kinds of ideas within the classroom in Goa at least. And I hope that this kind of book is being discussed more and more within the classroom, and such more stories come out, and more experiences. So it brings out a completely different side of Goan society, wherein we see Goa as a very liberal space, as a very equitarian society, a place where it's a tourist destination. But there is also another side of Goa which I feel this book brings about. And I feel that we could have even more such stories coming up, but only when we have this book being circulated and read enough among the Goan population as well. So thank you, and I wish all of us all the best.
Thank you, Favi, for sharing your thoughts. Our next speaker is a Marathi novelist, critic, and a bilingual translator. He has taught philosophy in 2 local colleges in Goa and was also associated with Sangat, Goa's mental health NGO. So let's please welcome Vishram Gupte to say a few words.
This is a great occasion for me personally. Being Alito's very close friend, I was destined to translate, I would say, his magnum opus into Marathi. I have called it Me Konn. Since this book occupied me for about 8 to 9 months, I was quite full of it. I was obsessed with this book. I used to discuss this with my wife, Silva. So I am going to tell you the process of translation in one way. Then I would also give a very brief picture of this book, which I registered. And then very briefly, I would talk about my association with Alito, my relationship with him, and what I earned, what I got from him, and what I gave. But before that, I would, since it is a Marathi book, I would speak few words in Marathi. मी कोण हे पुस्तक मला, म्हणजे मी कादंबऱ्या लिहितो आणि मला असं ती एक 10 कादंबऱ्यांचं कथानक असलेलं एक मला मसाला मिळाला. त्याचा युजुअली असा प्रश्न विचारला जातो की मी कोण, तर त्याला मग तू ब्रह्म आहेस, किंवा तू ईश्वराचा अवतार आहेस, किंवा तू ईश्वर आहेस, असं सांगितलं जातं. पण अलितोच्या या पुस्तकामध्ये मी कोण याचा एक सामाजिक दृष्ट्या, सांस्कृतिक दृष्ट्या एक खोल असा शोध घेतला गेलेला आहे. आणि तो 10 वेगवेगळ्या विद्यार्थ्यांच्या मार्फत, त्यामुळे त्या शोधाचं स्वरूप असं आहे की ते त्याला 10 दिशा असतात असं एक कथानक आपण म्हणूया, असं ते कथानक आहे. आणि त्याचं खूपच महत्व आहे असं मला वाटतं. मराठीमध्ये हे पुस्तक, ज्याला आपण अनप्रेसिडेंटेड म्हणतो इंग्लिशमध्ये, असं एक पुस्तक आहे की ते अतिशय रोचक आहे, पण तितकंच ते गंभीर सुद्धा आहे. सो मला असं वाटतं की या पुस्तकाची म्हणजे या पुस्तकाचं डिस्ट्रीब्युशन मराठीचं, इंग्लिश तर जगभरात जाईल, पण हे मराठी पुस्तक किंवा गोव्यामध्ये कॉलेजेस सोशॉलॉजी शिकणाऱ्या विद्यार्थ्यांमध्ये जर काही पुस्तक पोहोचलं तर त्यांना स्वतःबद्दल आणि गोव्याबद्दल काहीतरी अनोखं कळेल असं मला वाटतं. आणि म्हणून या पुस्तकाचं मला महत्व अपूर्व आहे असं मला सांगायचं आहे. नाउ आय वुड स्विच टू इंग्लिश. इट्स अ व्हेरी युनिक book, as Dr. Alexander has already beautifully summed up and Favita has added to that summation. This is a book which raises some fundamental existentialist question. Who am I? And if you ask this question to, say, a typical Indian guru, he would tell you that you are a Brahman, or you are a supreme human being, or you are somebody who is one with God, or you are a seeker. The Alito is not someone who would buy these arguments. He was a hardcore rationalist, a modernist, and he would want you to know your exact location, your gender, your caste, your class, your location, geographical location, your language. All those things were very, very important for Alito as a teacher, as a human being, as a friend. So I feel that with this inquiry, he inspired his students to think about it. This is actually a very spiritually charged question, who am I? But Alito wanted his student to understand this question in a sociological context. I would say that this is a very unique sociological and anthropological study of Goan society. Those who have known this book, those who have read this book, they know what I'm talking. But those who have not yet read this book will come through as a mirror. You are completely zapped by the content. I feel that being a writer, writing a fiction is something which comes to me naturally. But when I started translating this book into this non-fiction book into Marathi, I was personally very enriched. I felt that there are so many aspects of Goan society which are new to me. And then I would not go into the details of those 10 narrations, but as a translator, what did I think about each one? For example, there is a question like idea of nativity. The first essay is about which is my native place. This is a very, very difficult question to some of us who have left our moorings and traveled to a distant land. So Priti Padgaonkar goes in search of this question. She is herself tormented, and then she comes to the conclusion that nativity is something which is not so very important to me today, although she began her journey with that. So I would say that this is a very philosophical question that Priti approaches with her sociological insights. The second essay is also very, very interesting, and I was actually thrilled to translate this essay. This is about New Age religion. Now, Rajeshwari Mehta has done a fabulous job by actually talking to people who have joined these sub-religious groups. Very important. And then the third essay is something very close to the hearts of many of us, the status of Kokani. Why, in spite of being an official language, Kokani doesn't enjoy the status, the prestige, the eminence. And Favita Gonsalves has done a very, very meticulous job. She has talked to people whose mother tongue is Kokani, but who are shy of speaking Kokani in public. Now, this is very familiar. Many of us know that we switch over to English as soon as we feel like impressing people. So how we forget our mother tongue and how then we become decultured. And then I would talk about a beautiful documentary. It is about Mopsa Market. Cheryl D'Souza have done a fabulous job. Mopsa Market is my favorite hunt. I usually go there. I used to buy all my things, of course, before pandemic. I used to think that I am an expert in Mopsa Market. I used to know everything. If you ask me all the traditional things, I would take you and I will take you to the exact person. But after reading and after translating Cheryl's Mopsa Market documentary, I would call it documentary, it is so visual. She talks about all those women who sell their things. It is very interesting. And then Venetia Fernandez talks about Kurdi village, how it was submerged due to a dam. Now, this is a fabulous narration. This is the memories of displacement and also longing for what we have lost. In fact, her father has lost his place. And she just knows from her father. And then she goes with her father to that space, that place. And there is a whole lot of reminiscences and insights. While I did it into Marathi, I found that I have to go to this place. I have not yet gone, but certainly the moment I get my chance, I will visit Kurdi, maybe during this summer. And then Elizabeth, who is anchor, she is anchoring this program very competently. She has written a poetic piece, I would say. Ami ka naata hoto. Why should we dance? And you get a completely ringside view of people who dance professionally and earn money, make living. I would call it a creative piece, a poetic piece. And then Muzina has written about where has our folk songs gone. This is actually full of nostalgia at one side and trying to regain, trying to recapture this thing through oral histories. She talks to many people. She talks to elderly generation people. She talks to young people. And she gets their opinion. And then, as a translator, I sympathize with her, I would say, narration. And then, Priyanka writes about being a very person. Now, this is something she is writing back to the establishment, which Alito wanted all of us to do. Alito taught this particular thing to his students. There is a tradition where the mainstream discourse is framed in a particular fashion. Now, Priyanka has raised some very fundamental questions. after going through the literature about value, she comes to a very funny conclusion that whatever, being a value, I could never get persuaded by all those books. So this is what a value is. And then she gives her interpretation. And then there is an exception. Sachin Morais, Alexander said that he is the only male narrator who is writing about this. Also a very, very touching book, touching account of what happens to the women whose husbands go on boat, make their living, send money, and how these women cope with their families, with their society, how they raise their children. Very, very moving account, very deeply touching account. And the last is written by Khushbu Narangi. Now, she is a Muslim girl coming from a Muslim background, coming from a conservative background, how she fights for her educational right and what she gets. And it's also very inspiring account of a Muslim girl who understands her status, but she wants to change it. She wants to emphasize she tells us that how education will be an answer. It's a very contemporary piece which has a lot of resonance with our life. Of course, I want you to read this book, and if those who can read in Marathi, I would be very happy to know from them what do they think, because this is a non-fiction and also an academic book. I would call it an academic book with a lot of bibliographic references and notes. I had difficult time in actually doing all these things. So actually, I will request Marathi readers to go through this book and opine about this book. Tell me whether they find it easy, whether they find it theoretically difficult, whether some jargons are missing, whether I have become more informal. So that is one thing that I would expect Marathi readers to do to this book. Now, I will just briefly tell you about Alito Siqueira, a friend of over more than 30 years. It's a story which will take hours, but I will give you a very brief account. If you ask me one word by which I have to describe Alito, what would that word be? I would not hesitate and say disruption. I am sure those who know Alito, they will immediately agree with this. Alito was an archetypal disruptor. These days, there is a fashion to call somebody a disruptor. And then there are media houses which have their workshops and their media interaction. They call them disruption and all. But Alito is the first disruptor which I saw in my life. When I came to Goa 37 years ago, when I met Alito, I could not believe. That time Alito and I were, both of us were in our 30s. I could not believe that such a spirit can exist. Of course, with all my writing pretensions and all those, I used to think that I am something like very offbeat. But when I met Alito, I was attracted towards him the way iron files get attracted towards a magnet. We used to meet very frequently. We used to eat together. We used to do a lot of things together. Discuss, talk. So this original disruptor taught me many things in my life. My wife and my two children, we were very fond of Alito, and he used to call us teams of India because We were all the time, four of us were going to him, and then we will go to some place, we will eat, then we will discuss, and we will discuss things which not an average person would enjoy. It's critical discourse, basically. So disruption is one faith which stayed with Alito throughout. He did not compromise with society. He did not compromise with system. He always challenged systems. He always asked questions. His colleagues in university know how he rattled the establishment. He shook them, and for which he is lauded and also cursed by few. The second thing that I noticed about Alito as a friend was that he was a very peculiar mixture of modernity and tradition. He would speak in a very modern jargons, but at the same time he will value all the local traditions, the rich culture that Goa possesses. He was very proud of it. And he was not just proud like ordinary man. He was a theoretician. He had this sense of inquiry. He would always inquire. He would always go deeper into the issue. So this is another aspect that actually touched me and also made me change my attitude. And then he was eternally interested in the problems of others. See, we have this famous us versus them and this and that. No? But he was always eager and willing to help others, irrespective of caste, class, anything. I would also say that he was somewhat like a counselor to so many of us. He was a soundboard. You go to Alito with your anxieties, you are seething with something, you go to Alito, he will make you sit, and then you wind up. He would make you say whatever you want to say. Then he would ask you pertinent questions, and which would give you insight into your own self. So he was all the time interested in plumbing deeper and deeper into his own self and helping others to plumb deeper into their self. That is a very, very unique thing that I saw in Alito. In fact, I can share a secret. My third novel, that is Ishwar.com, it is actually a metaphor for Goa. And you know the protagonist, Professor D'Souza. He is actually, Alito made me think about Professor D'Souza. Those who want to know what it is. When Milan read that novel, she was laughing and laughing and laughing. And Alito was asking, what are you laughing so much? Milan knew what it is. So, in fact, Alito inspired me. He actually deeply, he inspired me to see Goa, see my society in a light which I did not see before. So there are so much that I can discuss about Alito. But I know we have limitation of time. So I would say that this Hanv Konn is a book which Alito made us see our own self. Alito wanted us to know our own self, and through his students, he is talking to us. Alito will always with us. This is the day when all of us should remember him fondly. We continue to remember him very fondly. But let me tell you that when I was translating this book, translating a book requires total dedication. Every word is your word versus the original word. And then you come out with a proper translation. So for every page, that every word, Alito was with me. And Alito is with me. Even. Thank you very much for giving me.
Thank you so much, Mr. Vishram, for this talk. I also take the privilege to thank Mr. Suhas Sadekar and Dinesh Manekar, because of whom the Marathi version would not be possible. Thank you so much, sir. And now we move on to the next session. We have our third speaker with us, who's a professor of cultural anthropology at the Department of Sociology, Faculty of Letters, Konan University, Japan. Professor Kyoko Matsukawa will now speak to us.
Thank you, Elizabeth, for introducing me. And, it's my great honor to be a part of this book launch event with Professor Alexander and Mr. Vishram and others. I am happy to cherish the memories of the late Alito Siqueira with familiar old faces in this challenging time of COVID-19. And I tell you that I'm now speaking from Japan. As you know, actually, Olympics Games over means I missed, the closing ceremonies. But anyway, there are lots of criticism going on about hosting the Olympic Games in Tokyo because the number of cases of coronavirus is now going up very rapidly. Favita, Gaspar, Sally, Rico, and others. And again, Elizabeth, thank you for hosting this event. And about Hanv Konn, Professor Alexander and Favita and Mr. Vishram have already spoken in details. So I would like to talk about my view of how Alito developed the ideas of Hanv Konn. Actually, my talk is based on a short essay, which I contributed to Hanv Konn book. I can't believe that 20 years have passed since I met Alito for the first time. At that time, I was a graduate student of Osaka University, the Japanese university. I was seeking to conduct fieldwork in Goa for my PhD. I became a visiting student at the Department of Sociology, Goa University. It was, great time that time. And I met Professor Alexander at that time. And it was, I think, in December 2000 when I met Alexander, right? Yeah, actually he then, starting to give lectures with Alito about Goan society. And I also attended a series of lectures. Alito was appointed as my local guide. Soon, I came to realize his unique way in teaching. As you know, he often dropped bombs, smashed stereotypical ideas, and opened students' eyes. And the same happened to me. And my research attempt to look into Goan society was, in the beginning, I wanted to do research on Catholic society in Goa. But later, I moved on to the language issues, especially battles between Konkani and Marathi in the 1980s. That shift originated from his question. As an anthropologist, I wanted to learn local language, Konkani, and I believed that Konkani was the sole language of Goa. But it was wrong. And Alito questioned me, like this. Kyoko, which konkani do you want to learn, Devanagari or Romi? I was wondering what's going on here. And anyway, later I came to realize that it's true. That script issue of Devanagari Romi, it was very significant in Goan society. Anyway, that idea, you know, Goan language is konkani, it originated from my view on language as a Japanese. The query forced me to examine it. I don't know how much you know about the history of Japan and Japanese language. Japan established Japanese as the sole language of the nation with a particular orthography from the end of 19th century to early 20th century. And I asked this to myself then, what is behind the multilingual situation in Goa, and how can this be related to India as a whole and the world, including Japan? So Alito's, you know, question had such an impact on me. You know, I'm a Japanese, and yeah, even I had to, you know, consider about my own society. What is Japanese language and what is the history behind that? And I took, you know, it took me 1.5 years. I stayed in Goa and I finished my field work in Goa. And during that time, I attended Konkani course. Actually, nobody has spoken in Konkani in this book launch yet. So maybe I should try a little bit in Konkani. Atan masih Konkani, you know, Whistleland. How na Goanta oitana sobrena Konkani yeta. Punatana Konkani practice korunga konna. Toshena maji Konkani masih. Anyway, and you know, this book, Hanv Konn, is in English and in Marathi. And I think somebody asked this in a comment, and and as Rico answered, it's you know, due to global market. English is dominant, and Marathi is also dominant in Goa as a written language. Puna ami konkani uloy, ani boroi, ani shikui. That is important. You know, that dominance of English over the world, it should be questioned. I think that is, you know, behind Alito's trial attempt of this Hanv Konn book. And I think in the future, Alito had an idea that he should, you know, create a platform in Konkani language too. I'm really sorry that he passed away before, you know, he could do that. And I would like to, you know, show and share some photos with you. This is, I think, Alexander, you remember this? We went to, you know, Savoy, and Alito is in front and he's smiling. It's quite rare.
Oh,
and,
this is really nice.
Gabriela is also there, you know.
Oh, beautiful. Thank you.
Yeah, today in the afternoon I went to university office and I found this and scanned this, and this is you know, photo which was taken when I attended Konkani Murao course, which was held at the Xavier Konkani Kendra. Yeah, you remember all the fathers and Shuruti and Father Mashu Almeida. I, launched, I think, a small magazine. Yeah, this is, memory I cherish. And I continue my talk. It would not be that long. That time when I started my career as a faculty member at Nara University, after I finished my initial fieldwork in September 2001, I joined Nara University as lecturer and submitted my PhD dissertation in 2005. I felt that it was time for me to start something new, more than just research. And I made a proposal to Alito. The project aimed to facilitate ways for people in Goa and Nara. Actually, I work at Goa University in Kobe, but I stay in Nara. Nara is an ancient place next to Kyoto and Osaka. And I wanted, people to discover their own society and exchange their discoveries via the internet. So, at the time, Alito and I had the same kind of ideas to take students out of classes. I took students out in neighborhoods to learn local history by listening to people's voices. And in the course of discussion with Alito, I came to be aware that Alito was struggling to come up with a new teaching method to enable the students to understand sociology from their own experiences and from the bottom of their heart. I remember he continually uttered, about the lack of interest in text among students in classroom. It looks like, students were really bored about reading text, memorizing all their concepts, and they had to, answer in examinations. And I can understand that. And we began our project with a fund by the Toyota Foundation and some collaborations in 2007. And we had workshops in Goa and Nara, with the help of Gaspar de Souza and Vishram Gupte, Salir Konkal, and Rahul Srivastava. However, I could not find the right approach towards our project in the beginning. And of course, we could exchange information on our workshops, on blogs, on the net. But at the time, we didn't have a YouTube, and we didn't have Facebook or Instagram. And of course, there was a language barrier. Translating text between English and Japanese would take time. And who could do that? Then what to do? And I felt reaching the dead end. And one day in 2018, I think it was in June, I received an email from Alito, and he enthusiastically wrote about his discovery of digital storytelling. It seems that he found the website of a Center for Digital Storytelling, the institution in the USA, and he actually organized digital storytelling workshop with students, and with the help of Gaspar de Souza and others. And there's a banner of Go Create. And it was an experiment in multimedia story. And it was quite innovative pedagogy. And I believe that, many contributors of Hanv Konn participated in the workshops. And actually, it was a video produced by Ms. Preeti Padugan-Kaur, one of the contributors of Hanv Konn book. And I was really moved by the power of the narrative expressed in, it was only 2-minute video. And she told her experience about, her failure in the life and her relationship with her own father. And it was quite emotional. And it was a turning point for our project. And in September 2008, I arranged a study trip of a group of Japanese students to Goa. And, we organized Hello Goa Nara event at the International Center of Goa. And it was followed by a short introductory workshop on digital storytelling. And I organized full digital storytelling workshop with the Japanese students after we were back in Japan, and they produced their own impressive stories based on their experiences in India trip. And in the meantime, Go Create team continued to organize more digital storytelling workshops. And I also would like to share actually it's a blog page of Gaspar de Souza. You can see some photos, and they were shot by Gaspar. Right. And one Japanese professor was hugging Alito, and it was really a good cultural event. Because of language barrier, we organized some unique methods. That photos showed that origami session, and I taught how to use chopsticks to a student, and yeah, like that. And I believe that he tried to incorporate the power of storytelling and, self-discoveries to his master's students' research and thesis writing. He told me about interesting and powerful dissertations that his students produced by doing research based on their own communities and experiences. I can recall that it was around 2010 when he eagerly expressed his desire to compile the writings and bring about a book. And of course I said, yes, this is really a good idea, great idea. You must go on. And several years passed, and I asked Alito about the progress of the book when I visited Goa. He replied, sorry, Kyoko, my introduction is not ready yet. It was Alito. His difficulty in writing was, from my point of view, caused by his attempt to integrate multifaceted point of views at the same time. He never feared to speak out, but he was very cautious about his writing. And I waited. And when I met him at the last time in December 2017, he told me that the draft of the book was nearly ready. And I could not travel to Goa in 2018. And I had not heard any news from Alito for some time. And actually it was July 14th, 2019. And I was supposed to travel to Goa in September 2019, the same year. But on August 8, I received the news that he passed away. Anyway, his legacy, we can carry on his legacy. And what he showed us, already Alexander and Vishram told us, each community has their own ways of presenting. And stories have such power. And everybody's stories should be valued. And university is a place to confine us to the academic ways, or concepts deriving from Western society, as well as how to write in an academic way. Higher education is based on a certain knowledge-producing system. And it looks down on local ways of knowledge production. He had foresight, really ahead of the age. Recently, in the fields of cultural anthropology and sociology, the methods of autoethnography are getting more attention. They allow people to reflect on their social position and presenting their stories in their own ways. I want to tell Alito that his accomplishment had the potential to be a part of the global movement of self-searching and empowerment beyond academic world. Yes, though he physically left, his spirit and passion always live with us, and we will continue his legacy. Okay, thank you for your attention, and I finish my talk.
Thank you so much. Now we move on to the publisher space. Among the publishers are Frederick Narona and Dinesh Manekar. I will call you one by one to speak with us and share your experience about the publishing details. Frederick Narona is an alternate publisher and journalist. He founded Goa 1556. In fact, his foundation, it carries Sir Alito's tagline, democratizing the production of knowledge. So I call upon Frederick Narona to say a few words.
It's one of the fictions of academia and of the marketplace that every book needs a publisher. Well, actually, you know, for those who know my publishing model, I am only the fictional publisher of this book, because don't talk to the people who worked on it, because they have been undergoing an uphill struggle to get it published. And the delays which Kyoko talked about are my responsibility. And as a result of that, the book got delayed many times. Anyway, as Liz just said, Alito's catchphrase, democratizing the creation of knowledge, is our tagline, which is not very easy to live up to at all stages. It's a tough job, and especially in a small state like Goa, in a small market, it's extremely a tough job to deliver knowledge and to create knowledge, package it and sell it. I'm sorry to use market terms, but this is a harsh reality of the marketplace. And of course, there are many small publishers who keep trying, and after 14 years in the field, I'm quite tired. I had a lot of faith that we could beat the market at its own game, but it seems to be a tough job. I think that this is not this problem cannot be solved by charity, because the market is small, but knowledge has to be produced, and even small states have a right, small regions have a right to produce their own knowledge. So how do we go about this? It cannot be solved by charity. Maybe we have hints of you know, a solution in terms of what Hanv Konn has delivered, where the full team works, and crowdfunding, crowdsourcing has actually produced quite a good book, if I may say so myself. Alito has been negotiating this book with me for a long time. If I put together his emails and my replies, we have enough material to put together another book. But that's beside the point. I won't get into that. But finally it came about quite well, and we are really happy to the team for bringing it out. It's really their credit, it's not my credit. But we need, my point I'm trying to make here is that we need alternative ways of producing and creating knowledge in a place like Goa. I will end on two personal notes, two very small personal reminiscences. The first one is that many people know Alito from an early stage. I know Alito from the day he was a junior lecturer. They were called lecturers then in Goa University, somewhere in 1986 or 1987. And I can even remember where exactly the bus was, the blue bus was, when I met him for the first time and encountered him. And we had many cups of chais, many agreements, many disagreements, many vehement disagreements, but that is part of our friendship. And that's the first point. And the last and the most significant point, I think, you know, Alito represents a particular phase of Goan history to me, as I understand it, because he is perhaps, you know, one of the torchbearers of the early phases of the student ferment that Goa saw in the early 70s, mid 70s, late 70s. And, you know, people like me represent probably in some ways on the bylines, on the sidelines, the last of that phase, which happened in the late 80s or mid 80s, when we still had dreams and we thought that a better society was possible. I mean, I've not given up my dreams, but about the possibility of it is a different point. So having said that, this is both an apology to the team for doing so little, because many things happened while we were working on the book. and it's hats off to them for bringing out this book. Thanks so much.
Now I call upon Dinesh Manekar. He's a column writer. He writes children's literature. He has written 6 books so far, and children's literature. He's also a translator and advisor to Sanjana Publication, and so far he has published more than 150 books.
First of all, I am very much thankful to Mr. For the beautiful translation of the book by Vishram Gupte in Marathi. And I am very much thankful to the whole team for allowing Sanjana Publications to publish the Marathi version of the book. I am of the opinion that this book should be translated in other Indian languages because the book is full of knowledge and a very rich book. Every part of India needs to know about the content of the book and about Professor Alito. As far as marketing of the book and the other problems of the publishers, Mr. Frederick has already told, so I won't say anything. But this book will be available on Amazon in another 2-3 days or so. It will be available at Margaon, with Confident. And if anybody wants it by post, before it is available on the stall, you may please WhatsApp to me on my number 955 255 1425. Immediately it will be sent to you by speed post, and we will see that the book reaches to you. The only goal of a publisher, I would say, is to see that all the books reaches to the readers. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Dinesh, for sharing these details with us. Now we move on to the book launch. We see usually in conventional book launches we have ribbon cutting and all, and now it's not possible because of the pandemic. So I would request everyone who has the book with them, you can turn on your cameras and you can lift the book and we launch the book together. So now the book is released.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you. I can see all your books raised and feel so good and proud of this thing. Now I call upon Salil Chaturvedi to please read to us the preface of the book.
Thanks, Liz. The preface is called Learning and Recovery Are Messy and Emotional by Alito Siqueira. I'm very happy to be reading Alito's words. This preface was written on the table I'm sitting on together over many meetings. It was not easy to get Alito to fix on his writings. When students sit blank-faced in silence, or speak or laugh loudly, or look bored, or are fidgety and distracted, showing a lack of application or concentration, they are treated as deficient in some way. When they have distinct or peculiar ways of perceiving and expressing their realities, they are thought to be lacking in terms of language skills, innate capacities, or cultural background. They are treated as limited in learning and academic behaviors, with no expectation of them to make any meaningful academic contribution. If you have ever been one of these, and which of us have not, then this blog is especially for you. This was written for the blog. If you are one of the lucky few who was always the blue-eyed student, then too, you may benefit from this book. In this book, you will see the variety of personal and cultural resources students bring to learning. You will see how such deficit-bearing students too can work through challenges and uncertainty, anger, pain, and shame associated with their person or a background, gender, or caste, or class, or beauty, or religion. Through their academic reading and writing, they reinvent themselves to produce knowledge and provide us with information and perspectives on tiny bits of realities. You will sometimes find yourself saying, "That is how I feel," and have a sense of liberation at hearing someone echo your experience. At other times, you might realize that this is a piece of reality around you that you were not even aware of. These authors show us how higher education could, and perhaps should, be a process of discovery and recovery from insults and hidden injuries while recreating one's identity as learners. You may also see that learning is messy and an emotional affair. And, within quotes, one cannot recover and look good at the same time, close quote, Julia Cameron. You could find a clue how to do this for yourself or in your classroom and take learning forward. You may even notice a hint of how these authors are challenging the conventional academic standards and redefining what could and should be higher education. Thank you.
Thank you, Salil, so much. So now we have come to the end of the speaking session, and now the floor will be open. And as we have got a lot of requests from Sir Alito, Professor Alito's close friends and associates who want to speak on this occasion, this space will be for you all to interact.